Alright, how should we go about dividing fractions? Let's suppose we wanted to divide 2/5 by 7/3. We'd like to get some fraction for our answer, but we don't know what. How could we figure out what this answer ought to be? Well, let's remember what division is. Division is just the opposite of multiplication. The question, what is 2/5 divided by 7/3, means the same as, what do I need to multiply 7/3 by to get 2/5? Let's think about what happens when we multiply 7/3 by something. We're going to multiply 7/3 times some fraction, and we're going to get an answer, 2/5, that doesn't have 7 as a factor in the numerator. So that must mean that we're going to simplify our answer. After we simplify, we'll have 2/5. Well, that means 2 must have been a factor of whatever we ended up with. Similarly, in the denominator, 5 must have been a factor of whatever we ended up with. We multiplied 7 by something, so 7 must be a factor in our numerator. We multiplied 3 by something, so 3 must be a factor in our denominator. But I don't want a 7 as a factor in my answer, so I must have had a 7 in the denominator to cancel that out with. Similarly, I don't want 3 as a factor in my denominator, so I must have had 3 as a factor in my numerator to cancel that out with. Well, that means my numerator here must have been 7 times 3 times 2. I started out with a 7. I must have 3 times 2 in the numerator of this fraction. Here I started out with a 3. I must have 7 times 5 in the denominator of this fraction. Okay. So we know what we need to multiply 7/3 by to get 2/5. We need to multiply 7/3 by 2 times 3 over 7 times 5. It must be that 2/5 divided by 7/3 is 3 times 2 over 7 times 5. That's 6/35. But we got this. Hey, we took our 2/5 and we multiplied it by something. We multiplied the numerator by 3 and the denominator by 7. This fraction, 3/7, is not unrelated to 7/3, right? It's, what is it? It's what we get if we reverse the numerator and the denominator. And it's going to be handy for this process, and so we give it a name. In general, to get the reciprocal of any fraction, we reverse its numerator and its denominator. So this suggests a procedure for dividing by a fraction. To divide by any fraction, we multiply by its reciprocal. So the steps are, first we rewrite as multiplication, taking the reciprocal of the divisor. Again, notice, we took the reciprocal of the number we were dividing by, not the reciprocal of the dividend. The dividend stayed put. And then once we've done that, we multiply normally. So if we want to divide 8/3 by 5/6, our first step would be to rewrite it as multiplication. 8/3 stays unchanged. Divided by 5/6 is the same as times 6/5. Notice, we have to change both things. Multiplying by some number is not the same as dividing by that same number. 6 divided by 2 is different than 6 times 2. The same is true of fractions. Dividing by some fraction is the same as multiplying not by the original fraction, but by its reciprocal. So when we rewrite, we must change both things. And now we multiply normally. So I'll have 8 times 6 over 3 times 5. I notice that 3 and 6 have a common factor of 3. So I can cancel out that common 3. I'm left with 8 times 2 is 16. And all that remains in the denominator is 5. So 8/3 divided by 5/6 is 16/5. We can confirm that by multiplying. This should mean that 16/5 times 5/6 equals 8/3. When we do that multiplication, 16/5 times 5/6, that's 16 times 5 over 5 times 6. I see an obvious common 5 to cancel. Then 16 is 8 times 2. 6 is 3 times 2. Cancel the common 2, and I'm left with 8/3, the way that I hoped. I'm going to give you one of these to try, both doing the division and confirming that it worked by multiplication. Divide 3/7 by 3/8, then confirm your answer by multiplying. Pause the video and try this now. Alright, we have 3/7 divided by 3/8. Rewriting that as multiplication, 3/7 stays the same, but now dividing by 3/8 is the same as multiplying by 8/3. So let's see. We'll have 3 times 8 over 7 times 3. We immediately see a common factor of 3 to cancel, and then 8 and 7 have no factors in common. So we get 8/7. Let's confirm that by multiplying now. What we hope is true is that 8/7 times 3/8 should be 3/7. When we perform this multiplication, well, 8 times 3 over 7 times 8, the common 8's cancel. We do indeed get 3/7. One thing to be cautious of. Let's suppose we want to divide 14/5 by 2/7. You might look at this and notice that 14 and 7 have a factor in common. That doesn't matter though, because we're not going to multiply these two fractions, and therefore we can't cancel anything. Instead, first we rewrite as multiplication, then we multiply, and only now may we begin canceling out common factors. I see a common factor of 2. I don't see any other common factors, so I'll multiply. 7 times 7 is 49. All that remains in the denominator is 5. I get 49/5. If we'd messed with this 7 back here, we would have gotten a completely different and completely incorrect answer. Why don't we care that 14 and 7 have a factor in common? Because we're not multiplying something with a 14 in the numerator by something with a 7 in the denominator. That's just not involved in this problem. Division and multiplication are different from one another. Before we can start taking multiplication-related steps, we need to have a multiplication problem on our hands.